Good evening, everyone. This is Wayne over at the Alchemical Tech Revolution YouTube channel. Tonight, we're going to be looking at a special little book here that comes out of the Ancient and Mystical Order Rosicrucis, the Ancient Mystical Order of the Rose Cross. This is a Rosicrucian group, and basically, the gentleman who wrote this, his name is Dr. R. Swineburne Clymer, M.D. He was a Grand Master in this order and a very important fellow back in the early part of the 1900s up into the mid-1900s. And he was one of probably the premier occultists and masters of this type of thing of our time. So any writings of his that you could get your hands on, I would highly recommend reading. And this one in particular that I found is really quite interesting because it makes a lot of very telling and very outright admissions, shocking admissions, right here. And we're going to read those here tonight. And I don't think I really have to add much to what's being said as far as my little interpretations and asides on things, because it's pretty cut and dry, the language. So you'll see right out of the gate here when I start reading it. This one's one that's going to answer a lot of questions for people that people have had questions about, things we've heard through the years that we were unsure if there was really something to it or not. Well, we're going to get the answers right here, and I'm just going to read the introductory part of this book. This book is called The Divine Law, Mastership, a fundamental textbook for all students enrolled in the secret schools, by R. Swineburne Clymer, M.D., also author of Philosophy of Fire, The Rosicrucians, Race Regeneration, The Way to Happiness, and Making Health Certain. This was published by the Philosophical Publishing Company at Beverly Hall, Quakertown, PA. Copyright 1922. So, without further ado, we'll get right into it. Introductory. And this is reading verbatim from the book here, folks. Introductory. This book is not addressed to the general public, but more particularly to those who are truly seeking for something aside from the ordinary, or that which is termed orthodox, and we shall therefore feel entirely free to express ourselves, without reservation, and to interpret the divine law as we have been taught it. When we entered the portals of the Great Fraternity in 1893, there were then established in America 5 branches of the ancient mysteries. These were the Rosicrucians, the Hermetics, the Magi, which were the priests of Melchizedek, the Illuminati, and the Priesthood. I'm going to pause right there, folks. Illuminati, okay? For anybody who's ever had any questions whether this organization exists or not, or has actually ended back in the 1790s, like was claimed about the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, which was founded by Adam Weishaupt back then, this should put that whole idea to rest. This group has come forward through the ages, still exists here today, and is very much a part of the fraternal brotherhoods. Now, it's kind of become a catch-all term for anything that we would consider this grand group of brotherhoods at the topmost levels, but it is a group that really, truly exists. It existed back in this time in 1922 when Dr. Clymer wrote this, and it exists even up into today. And it is kind of shrouded in secrecy, but this is one of the orders that he's speaking about here. So let's go through. I'm going to read that paragraph again. Pay very close attention, because we need to know who are these groups. And so I'll read it again. When we entered the portals of the Great Fraternity in 1893, there were then established in America 5 branches of the ancient mysteries. These were the Rosicrucians, the Hermetics, the Magi, and it says here, right after Magi, priests of Melchizedek, and pay attention to that. That's important, folks. The Illuminati, and the Priesthood, and Priesthood is capitalized there. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different groups here in America that he's talking about, that were these important groups that were considered the 5 branches of the ancient mysteries. These are the true Mystery schools, these are the things that are at the top of all the different secret societies. This is the inner circle, folks. He's talking about the inner circle, okay? At the tops of these secret societies is an inner circle of interrelating groups, and this is exactly what he's speaking of here. So that's where we're at there. So let's go ahead. I'll continue on. Back to the book here. I'm going to read again, picking up where we left off. The general public knew comparatively little regarding the ancient mysteries. Occasionally, members of one or the other of these fraternities would write an article, and these would appear in various journals. Among the writers, Paul Tyner and Alexander Wilder were most widely known. At the time of our ordination to the priesthood in 1903, and the assuming of a humble part in the field of labor, comparatively no change had taken place. At this time, we commenced the publication of books on the Rosicrucians and their teachings, as well as on the philosophy of the ancient initiates. Within a few years, these publications were known throughout the entire globe, and lo, organizations sprang up like mushrooms in a night. Most of these assumed, without authority and illegally, insignia and titles belonging exclusively to fraternities that could trace their lineage 2 centuries before the Christian era, but this did not prevent the pseudo-initiates from using them for their own selfish and unrighteous purposes. Gonna pause there again, folks. So what he's saying is they started publishing some of these materials, and different people that were outside of what they consider these accepted groups started picking up on these things and teaching them from these different fraternities. So they're talking about some of the Blue Lodge people, that kind of thing, some of the lower initiates, ones that weren't really part of their inner circle. So they started using these and started up some of their own groups. See, that's what he's talking about, and spreading these. And that made this man very angry, apparently. So he's writing about it here. But let's get back to the reading. One of the first and most extraordinary innovations attempted by these non-initiates, who assumed an authority which can be attained only through faithfulness, obedience, and service, was to instill into the minds of those who were uninformed and who fell into the net spread for them the non-necessity, aye, even the sin, of the obligation, more than all else combined of which they were guilty. This would at once have stamped them as ignorant pretenders in the eyes of all who had ever entered a true school which taught the ancient mysteries, and therefore capable of training one for initiation and soul illumination. Gonna pause there again, folks. See, he was very upset, and he said that some of these other orders that sprang up that were not approved of by these upper-level members, these 5 councils that he's speaking of there, these 5 different fraternal brotherhoods that were interconnected, the ones that they didn't approve of, they called them basically fake and said that they were not the real deal. Okay, now whether there's any truth to that or not, it seems like some of the teachings are probably the same, but I think this is mostly just this inner circle trying to discredit anybody who ran away with their secrets and let them out. Okay? That's what I'm sensing here. He's had this fear that people are going to find out the inner secrets of these greater mysteries and these mystery schools and teach them without the approval of the people up at the topmost levels of the power structure. See, that's dangerous for them. They have to keep full control of this information in order for it to work for them. So they were very upset about some of this information spreading into unapproved groups. So that's what he was talking about here once again. But let's get back to the reading. The apostolic dissension of the priesthood of the Magi dates beyond the year 4255 BC. Aspirants entered the school of the initiates in their youth. No neophyte was allowed to take part in any initiatory ceremonies until the seeker had attained a certain grade of soul development. The ancient mysteries, ancient even before that date, were taught all who entered. Later, these mysteries were taught in the secret schools of Greece, India, Persia, Thrace, Scandinavia, and the Gothic and Celtic nations. In these mysteries were illustrated the unity of God, the immortality of the soul, and the possibility of bringing into conscious manifestation the flame of the soul. From the first dawn of civilization, all who sought knowledge of the powers of the soul and light on the future of the soul entered these schools of the sacred priesthood, and on entering were bound by a most secret obligation not to divulge any of the teachings except those likewise prepared, and to protect all the secret writings, thus preventing them from falling into the hands of the profane. Gonna pause right there, folks. You hear that? They want to make sure that their secret teachings don't fall into the hands of the profane, and that's you and me. Okay? And that's even people in their own fraternities and brotherhoods. That's the kind of the thing. They lie to the lower lower level members of these fraternities and brotherhoods about what the meanings of their symbols are and what the teachings are. Okay, there's different layered meanings to a lot of this stuff, and only the ones at the highest, most levels are allowed to know. And that's kind of what they're talking about here. So they have to take an oath, and we see this within the Freemasons too. They swear an oath not to reveal any of the secrets of their order. Let's continue on. Written history admits that all the wise men were initiates in the mysteries, and the true Rosicrucian school, as well as the order of the Magi, are direct descendants of the ancient priesthood, and today, as in ages past, they demand of their proselytes an obligation. When, therefore, usurpers, who had themselves never taken an obligation in the secret schools, and consequently had neither been instructed nor trained, took for their own selfish purposes honored titles such as the Rose Cross and the Illuminati, and impressed upon their followers the undesirability or necessity of the obligation, they at once proclaimed two things. First, that they, not having entered the secret schools, could not possibly teach or train their followers in anything which is taught in these fraternities. Second, having been neither trained nor taught in the fraternity whose honored name they assumed, they were deliberate frauds of the deepest dye, for there is no greater villainy than the use of a religious cloak for selfish purposes. Gonna pause right there again, folks. So he's speaking about these ones that take up these teachings falsely, and take on these exalted names and stuff falsely, and he's actually correct about this. This is how a lot of this stuff has happened. A lot of these ancient mystery school teachings, they're not inherently bad or evil, okay? But what has happened is people who, for their own selfish gains, have tried to take and keep these secrets from people for use for control over people, have been using them maliciously against the public. And so, in a way, he's correct about this. Now, whether or not, he thinks he's on the right side of things or not when he's writing this, who could say? I myself find secrecy like this repugnant. There's no good thing can come from this kind of secrecy. So the thing is, that's what's bound to happen when you have a structure like this that's keeping secrets from who they view as the profane. It's bound to happen where a few evil, twisted individuals will twist those teachings and use them for their own nefarious purposes. So whether the intentions here were good, or whether the intentions were purely selfish, who could say for sure? But you see, the hubris is there, and pride always goeth before destruction, okay? And this is a very prideful thing, to have this kind of an attitude, and you can see this attitude that he has. Now, yes, he's correct about people using it, these secret teachings and some of these mystery school philosophies and stuff for evil means and for selfish gains. That's true, but do you see, he doesn't see how he himself is actually contributing to that, just simply by being part of this fraternity and being part of this quote-unquote inner circle that's trying to keep these secrets from the rest of the masses, and that's strictly for the purpose of control, okay? Because that's the thing. I mean, if you offer the information to the people freely, I understand, don't cast your pearls before swine, that kind of a concept and all. But the thing is, if you're selfishly keeping them just to this level of secrecy and these societies the way they are, to this tight inner circle, permeating all these different groups, that is kind of dangerous in and of itself as well, because there's no oversight then with any of this stuff. And who are they to deem themselves the keepers of these secrets, and them to figure out who's worthy and deem who's worthy of them? See, that's the thing. There's the hubris involved there, once again, that we see with all these secret society groups. They hold themselves up on a higher pedestal than others. And when they do that, that sets a dangerous precedent. Okay? Let's see. Where did we leave off here? Okay. Written history admits that all the wise men were initiates in the mysteries, and the true Rosicrucian school, as well as the Order of the Magi, are direct descendants of the ancient priesthood, and today, as in ages past, they demand of their proselytes an obligation. When, therefore, usurpers who had themselves never taken an obligation in the secret schools, and consequently had neither been instructed nor trained, took for their own selfish purposes honored titles such as the Rose Cross and the Illuminati, and impressed upon their followers the undesirability or necessity of the obligation, they at once proclaimed two things. And I know we read this already, folks, but I'm just reading it again, just so it sinks in. First, that they, not having entered the secret schools, could not possibly teach or train their followers in anything which is taught in those fraternities. Second, having been neither trained nor taught in the fraternity whose honored name they assumed, they were deliberate frauds of the deepest dye, for there is no greater villainy than the use of a religious cloak for selfish purposes. And that's true, folks. There's no greater villainy than using a religious cloak for selfish purposes. But that's exactly what these secret societies do, and that's exactly what this group here is doing, and that's exactly what this guy here was doing, though he doesn't see it that way. See, that's the thing, how their mindset gets twisted around, and they're able to justify their actions through this moral relativism. And that's one of the key aspects of these secret society groups, these secret brotherhoods. They're moral relativists, and they just see themselves as being, justified in their actions. They view themselves as being, the gods among men. The rest of us, we're the profane. We don't deserve this knowledge or to be able to understand these things. So, they keep it from us, and they use it as a means of control. So that's kind of where that sits. Well, let's continue on. I don't want to get too hung up on that point. Moreover, when anyone claims to be an initiate, it implies that he has been trained and taught in the secret schools, or august fraternities, and this is indicative that an obligation has been assumed. If any of these pseudo-leaders had actually taken upon himself the vow of the soul and then repudiated it, then such are less to be trusted than the worst degenerate known to history. We speak knowingly and with authority. We have records before us, whereon is written the history of many an aspirant who entered the great school. A great number of these proved faithful to their obligation and attained the final degree of illumination. A few deliberately, through selfish and ignoble motives, attempted to evade their solemn oath, and in each case, sickness, failure, or death followed as a result. Why? Because the vow was taken upon their own soul, and this was the beginning of the creation of vibrations which would gradually gain an impetus, leading them to health, success, and finally illumination and immortality. But their disloyalty reversed these vibrations, became loaded with the destructive forces of the dishonored soul. Naturally, this brought the downfall of the ignoble soul who attempted to evade the divine law. Gonna pause there again, folks. You see, he's saying that these folks who did not have the approval of this inner circle, see, that somehow they have divine providence, the people in this inner circle. So if somebody takes their teachings and uses them for their own gains rather than the good of these other secret inner circle brotherhood fraternities and this kind of thing, that they'll be punished for it, and failure and death and stuff will follow as a result. So do you see that? And he's claiming this is Naturally, this brought the downfall of the ignoble soul who attempted to evade the divine law. So they're claiming divine providence here. They're claiming that they're the divine law, that these initiatic orders are the divine law. Okay? These secret societies. He's saying this is the divine law, that there's supposed to be this secret priestcraft that runs everything. Do you see the hubris here again, folks? So this is part of the major problem with many of these groups. Although a lot of the teachings and stuff they give are true and have very good information behind them, and even though they have this veil of morals and good aspects to them, at the topmost levels, these people are of that twisted mindset that they have the divine right to rule, that they have this divine providence to rule over everybody else, and that it's only through them, these select few initiates at the topmost levels of these secret societies, that have any say or any divine right to rule. Excuse me, let's get back to the writing now. The present priesthood is directly descended from the ancient school of the mysteries. Its interpretation of the divine law has not deviated one jot nor tittle. Ages have proved to the initiates that no changes could be made. Its findings are based on demonstrable truths. The training today is identical with that of past centuries, and when instructions are faithfully and unquestionably followed, illumination and conscious immortality of the soul is assured. A solemn obligation is as essential now as during the Dark Ages. Why? Because no two aspirants who enter the portals of the school are alike in their needs or natures. The training is individual. The instructions, which will save one body from disease and bring the soul in that body to illumination, would result in destruction to body and soul in another individual. Just as the medicine that the physician prescribes for one patient would bring death to another with an opposite ailment. Likewise, is this true relative to other instructions taught in the great school? The teachings which will raise one seeker from a state of degradation would instill unworthy desires in another. These are but few of the many reasons why the obligation is a necessity. He who in any manner ignores his obligation and allows books or manuscripts to pass from his hands to another, thereby becomes responsible for the effects upon that soul. It will be readily seen that those who claim to be initiates and then teach that an oath is not necessary are either degenerate or wholly ignorant of all that the secret schools have ever stood for. Going to pause there again, folks. Do you see the importance that he's putting upon this idea of an initiate having an obligation to the group? That they have this responsibility to the order. This is all part of the control structure of things, too. And, he's saying that anyone that claims to be an initiate and teaches that an oath is not necessary is either degenerate or wholly ignorant of all that the secret schools have ever stood for. That should tell you something about what these secret schools stand for, folks. The fact that you have to take an oath, and it's usually a blood oath, an oath on your life, to be part of this, and then you're obligated to them. It's like the mob, okay? It's like organized crime. Same thing. That's what it is. That's what it is. That should tell you everything you need to know about these secret fraternities and brotherhoods, okay? But we're just going to move on from there. Let's read on. The priesthood of the Magi, or of Melchizedek, is older than any written record possessed by man. Before records were written, were we, and none can possibly possess authority under the ancient priesthood except those who entered its portals in a legitimate manner, took the prescribed obligation, studied, were trained, and ordained therein. Not one of these pretenders has ever proven faithful, and those claiming the authority of the Magi who did not enter and remain within its protective circle are deliberate frauds fattening upon the credulity of the honest but ignorant seekers. Gonna pause there again, folks. You hear that? He's calling out any of these other lesser groups or anybody who attempts to teach any of these teachings that they have. He's calling them out as frauds, saying they don't understand. Okay? They don't understand. They haven't been taught properly. You have to go through this small group of this brotherhood, this divinely guided brotherhood at the top. You see what I'm saying here? They're saying that you're not a true initiate of this group if you don't go through this training and this teaching, and if you're not bound by the obligation or the oath, and you don't go through the proper channels to learn this stuff. So any of us who are reading these books online right now, he thinks that we're no good. We're just as the same as the profane, which that we can't possibly understand this, that they're so intellectually superior to us that we're just missing the point here in the things that they're writing about. Remember, folks, this book, he tells you right in the beginning, this is not intended for the profane, okay? I'm sure that these groups are not very happy that this book is available to the public right now. It's out there. You could find it out there. Just look for it. You'll find it. A lot of telling things in this book. Anyway, let's read on. Where did we leave off? Okay. That the priesthood of Melchizedek dates to long before the Christian era is clearly indicated in the biblical narrative. Chapter 5 of Hebrews reads, "For every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins." This verse clearly indicates that those who are to become priests of the order must leave men, the ordinary thoughts and beliefs, must be taught the things pertaining to God, and lastly, must be ordained for their ministry, teaching, and service. Number 2, who can have compassion on the ignorant, and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. Number 3, and by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer for his sins. Number 4, and no man taketh this honor unto himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. Number 5, so also Christ glorified not himself to be made an high priest, but he that said unto him, Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee. Number 6, as he saith also in another place, Thou art a priest for ever after the order of Melchizedek. Number 7, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications, with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared. Number 8, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. However far advanced an aspirant may be, he sincerely honors his own obligations and the instructions which helped him to become at one with the Father and a priest of the order. Attainment does not indicate repudiation of one's honorable contract, but rather binds one the closer to the source whence help was received. With soul growth also comes the inclination to be more obedient, and with stricter obedience results greater attainment. Gonna pause right there, folks. You hear that? See, it's very important to these people that you be obedient without question to their orders, and that this leads to greater spiritual growth for you. You hear that? The more spiritually advanced you are, the more you listen to authority. You hear that? The more you bow down to this authority, unquestionably. This is mind control, folks. This is plain and simple mind control programming. They want you to do exactly what the authority figure tells you, what this high priest tells you, okay? And what the head of the order tells you. You do it unquestioningly. You're obliged. You have that obligation. You took the oath. You hear? You remember? Do you see what's going on in society right now? It's a giant initiatory rite. That's exactly what's going on. It's all very occult. Everything happening right now in public, folks. Anyway, back to the reading. Number 9. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey, Practice as he taught, and as we teach the divine law, him. So, see that? I'm going to pause there again, folks. Salvation, the author of eternal salvation unto them that obey. Okay? Don't get much plainer than that, does it? Let's continue on. Number 10, called of God and high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Number 11, of whom we have many things to say and hard to be uttered, seeing ye are dull of hearing. Number 12, for the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk, and not of strong meat. Number 13, for everyone that useth milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. Number 14, but strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. In the last 3 verses, we find clearly indicated the absolute need of a double doctrine. Gonna pause there, folks. A double doctrine, you hear that? There's one doctrine for the lesser initiates, and there's one doctrine for the greater initiates, okay? So they deceive their lower classes of their initiates with this stuff. That's the double doctrine. That's also why they hide everything in esoteric secrets. They hide it in a surface narrative. The exoteric. They use exoteric stories to describe esoteric ideas. And if you don't have the key to the esoteric ideas, if you don't understand, you think they're talking about something completely different. There's your double doctrine. Okay? Double speak. Where have we heard that before? Let's continue on. The simpler instructions are open to all who have not advanced beyond the threshold, and the more advanced individual training is for those who have entered the portals of the temple. Those who seek to be so instructed must be willing to take upon themselves the solemn vow for protection of themselves, their fellow men, and the fraternity. There are other references to the ancient priesthood, as for instance, that in verse 20 of chapter 6, Hebrews, whither the forerunner is for us entered, even Jesus, made an high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Another reference, and one clearly indicating that the priesthood of Levi was thereafter divinely repudiated, though the laws previously taught by it still continued in force, is found in the 11th verse of the 7th chapter of Hebrews. If, therefore, perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek, and not be called after the order of Aaron? Gonna pause right there, folks. See the importance they're putting on this idea of this priesthood of Melchizedek, and I think we discussed that in the last video that I put out. What is this priesthood of Melchizedek? Well, this is the dual office of priest and king. This is the combination of government and religion. Okay, this is the priesthood with the statehood, priestcraft combined with statecraft. Okay. This is the template for the Vatican, and it's the template for the coming new technocracy. All right? This is what's going on. They're trying to combine this idea of, that the Vatican has represented here for the past several thousand years, and they're porting it over into this new technocratic control model. Because you see, what they're doing is they're ripping the very soul out of this thing and replacing the spirit thereof with the spirit of something else. And this is what Antichrist is. Okay? So this is what the control system is. They're taking the humanity away, is what it basically is. They're trying to rip away the vestiges of humanity and replace it with something artificial. And that's kind of what this whole idea represents. This priesthood of Melchizedek. They're appointing this to pretty much the artificial intelligence. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to port over these functions of priestcraft and statecraft to artificial intelligence and put that in charge. That's the Antichrist system, folks. that's what's coming. That's what's been predicted in the Bible. That's what everybody is talking about when it comes down to it, as to what is this spirit of Antichrist. Well, that's it. It's completely inhuman. It takes away the human element of it all and just replaces it with this pure control structure. Because you see, men are flawed in their decision-making process. But for some reason, these people in positions of power seem to think that machines are less inclined to make those kind of mistakes, especially in artificial intelligence. And that's one of the core aspects here that we're looking at. But anyway, not to ramble on too much about that, but let's get back to the reading here. Let's see, where do we leave off? All right. Another reference, and we read that part. Sorry about that. The ancient order of the Magi, priests of Melchizedek, continues today, fully functioning as it has the... I can't make out what these words say because this part of the page is ripped and burned away in this book that's been scanned in. The ancient order of the Magi, priests of Melchizedek, continues today, fully functioning as it has the mysteries or something like that of the past. All true seekers may enter its portals by... and I can't make out what that says. Well, anyway, we'll continue on from where I can read, because that's, like I said, the page is torn or burnt right there of this when it's scanned in. Obligation that is required. The instructions are elemental, and the termed the divine law and the science of the soul. They are also advanced to meet the requirements of the individual aspirant. Ordination to the priesthood can be conferred upon all who have proven worthy and withstood the necessary tests. Okay, we're going to continue on here. Another fallacious and destructive belief instilled into the minds, hearts, and souls of the uninstructed by the inculcators of false philosophies is that of something for nothing. They claim that all instructions and training should be free and without compensation, despite the uncontradictable fact that there is nothing free in nature, that with every breath which we inhale, millions of creatures must lose their lives so that we may live. Gonna pause right there, folks. He's talking about the law of reciprocity. I can't even say that word right, pretty much here. He's saying here that... There's always, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, okay? He's talking about something in that kind of vein here. I don't know if I necessarily agree with his, his statement there that for every breath we inhale, millions of creatures must lose their lives so that we may live. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but, I get what he's saying. Let's continue on and see what else he has to say about this. The law of the universe is equal exchange. If one renders another service, that other must compensate in some way or stand indebted to nature's law until such time as full returns have been rendered. Gonna pause right there. You see, they do teach some true aspects of things there. I think there is some truth to that statement and to that concept. That exchange, that if one renders another service, the other must compensate in some way. You see, this is the belief system of these people, and that's why they believe so heartily in this idea of karma and karmic retribution, and why they also use methods such as revelation of the method, what we would call predictive programming in the conspiracy circles. That's why they do this, because, see, they're offering it to you so that when it comes about, they're telling you, They're giving you the warning. That's why they give you the warning, you see, because of this concept. So they're giving you this, and in exchange for this, then you owe them, by the law of nature, the equal exchange for that. So at that time, you get full returns for the services rendered. So they're offering you this service. They warned you this was coming, and now, when it's time that this actually comes about, you pay them back in some way or another. See? They're always trying to invoke this kind of an idea on us. Anyway, let's continue on. Religion is free. That is uncontradictable. but whoever devotes time and energy to the instruction of the seeker must in some way be compensated, that they, in turn, may be able to pay others for the necessities of life and the many essentials of modern existence and service. The truly honest man, the man whose heart is clean, refuses to accept anything, whether material or spiritual, without returning something of equal value, because he fully comprehends that to do otherwise will at once make him a victim of the law of compensation. Gonna pause there. The law of compensation, folks. See, this is one of the core fundamental things that they believe. The law of compensation. And like I said, I think there is some truth to this, but I think they've twisted it way out of proportion in a lot of ways in the things that they do. Let's continue on, though. One who has given his time and energy to a careful investigation of cults and isms, many of which claim to accept no payment for their teachings or services, makes the statement that pro rata, the members of such bodies pay many times more than the one donation required on entering the legitimate fraternities or orders. These contributions are obtained under the guise of free will offerings, which are continually hinted at until the members, often unconsciously, feel that they must give to their utmost in order to show that they are not guilty of being unappreciative. Gonna pause right there, folks. You see, and we see the same thing in the churches today, don't we? Make sure you give your tithes. You don't want to be unappreciative of, the teachings and the things that they're doing. And, and there's nothing wrong with this. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of truth to what they're saying here. But in regards to these brotherhoods and fraternities, you're, paying your Masonic dues and stuff like that. It gets a little heavy-handed, doesn't it, at times? But anyway, that's neither here or there. Let's continue on with the reading. Not many years ago, we had the opportunity to watch the method of procedure of one who established an order of the modern type and who literally flooded the country with literature and offered both his services and those of his new society free to all. At the same time, he brazenly taught that all religious and mystical instructions should be free to all seekers and that his society would live up to the mystic law so indicated. The founder of said society had enrolled and taken the obligation in one of the legitimate fraternities, but criticized the established practice of requiring a donation sufficient to cover books, manuscripts, and the services of the teacher who was capable of instructing and training him. It was his idea to establish a society with countless numbers, having them enroll under the delusion that religion was free, and that all mystical instructions should likewise be free. He was careful not to hint to those applying for help and instructions as to how the enormous bills for printing, advertising, postage, clerical help, and services of trained workers, many of whom had large families, should be paid. Then, after they had been enrolled, taught for months or years, and fully imbued with the dogmas they taught, in devious ways he obtained money, and more money from them. This is actually the plan followed by most of those who loudly talk of all should be free. The party in mind was desirous of obtaining for a partner one who had experience in legitimate work, and from some of the letters the following extracts are recorded. These give the usual plan. Now, I'm going to pause there, folks. The author starts to quote from these writings of this person that he's speaking about here. And that's what the next couple paragraphs are. So let's read on what he says, what this person who set up this unapproved brotherhood had to say here. And it starts here. As to plans, I would suggest that you handle the general field work for the present. You have good people in many parts of the country. Let them get busy locally. Let them send in the names of any and all persons whom they believe likely to be eligible. They can do this secretly where they wish to do so. Then you can mail out to the new prospective the literature consisting of circular letter, circular, etc. If they are interested, they will gladly sign the obligation and send you their application for membership, and you can do the rest. I will try to write all literature and monthly lessons, and you can get them out, and this should furnish us with picked people. I am satisfied that there are thousands of very fine members ready and waiting, and who will furnish the means later also, provided we do not spoil them by seeming over-anxious about the money question. I would suggest that you do not try to sell them books for a long time, and then only where you perceive that they are the right sort of persons to understand it all. Otherwise, you will cross-current and queer them. I would advise that we keep them exclusively in the fellowship idea until we are positively certain that they are ready and will stand for the higher things. If you will handle it from there for the next 2 years until I get settled, then I will assume the handling of it all, if it is the best that I should. In this way, there will be no expensive advertising bills and not so much postage, and we will get a much better class of people. I will try to plan means to get money from them later. But if we attempt to hold them up for it, then it will be impossible to either get or keep the best class of individuals. It looks to me as though it would not be wise for you to be too hasty in trying to get them to take up the higher fraternities and get on a paying basis with them. Such a move is liable to spoil them. In fact, it is almost certain to destroy their confidence. People are very sensitive on the money question and very quick to see any motive or move leading to it. This is the usual I, the universal something for nothing, and religion is free plan. Now, this is the author again speaking, folks, starting with this is the usual, the universal something for nothing, and religion is free plan. And he goes on here to state, this is the author, this is Dr. Clymer again, back to his thoughts here, and I'll begin reading where we left off. There is nothing free in nature. Irrespective of how sacred a possession one may have, in this age it is important to confer it upon others without the medium of exchange. Sorry, I think I read that wrong. Let's start that again. There is nothing free in nature. Irrespective of how sacred a possession one may have, in this age it is impossible to confer it upon others without the medium of exchange. If we possess a truth that will make free, then in order to confer its benefits upon others, and do it without compensation, we must ourselves have the money to print, mail, and pay postage, to say nothing of our time. By doing this, we at once make debtors of those who accept, and they will be bound, body and soul, until such time as they have returned a just compensation. Gonna pause right there, folks. Do you see this concept here? So, whenever somebody's offering you something for nothing, you're bound, body and soul, to them until such time as you've returned a just compensation to them. Do you see how this works? Did you get your free flu shot? I'm just saying, that's exactly this principle that this is based on. And like I said, they do teach some true principles and stuff here, and sometimes they twist them into a perversion of how they should operate, and it's definitely nefarious. Okay, going to continue reading here. If we have not the money, and the one who is desirous of being taught furnishes it through a free will offering, then the aspirant is paying more than for value received, and others who have the benefits conferred upon them become his debtor. Therefore, spiritual beggars until they have compensated him. In all the ramifications of life, men and women have learned through experience that they must pay a fair price for value received, but in the field of the occult and the mystic, charlatans have so blinded even many honest seekers that they are actually deluded by the belief that salvation of soul is free, and that somewhere someone will labor for them without a thought of compensation. The law of compensation demands that we shall accept nothing, be it material or spiritual service, without making adequate returns. This is part of the divine law, which the secret schools have always inculcated in their neophytes. We close with our introductory statement. This book is not addressed to the general public, but more particularly to those who are truly seeking for something aside from the ordinary or orthodox. We have been fearless and frank in our remarks, so that there no longer could be any misunderstanding relative to the work and teachings of the legitimate fraternities. Fraternally given, R. Swineburne Clymer, Exalted Grand Master, Illuminati Americani of the world, Supreme Grand Hierarch of all the High Priests, Order of the Magi, and Priests of Melchizedek of the universe. You hear that, folks? Boy, does this guy have some titles or what? Exalted Grand Master, Illuminati Americani of the world, Supreme Grand Hierarch of all the High Priests, Order of the Magi, and Priests of Melchizedek of the universe. Wow. So this guy is telling you, you don't get something for nothing in this life, folks. That's one of the basic messages of truth you could get out of this. But the other part of this are some of the shocking and stark admissions in here that Dr. Clymer was making. The existence of these fraternities, these secret brotherhoods, they've really kept a tight lid on this stuff for the longest time. But this is actually who are at the inner circles of all these other smaller secret society groups. Things like the Masons and, some of the other orders, the Rosicrucian Brotherhoods, the Order of the Eastern Star. The list goes on and on. The Golden Dawn. All of these secret societies, at the topmost levels of these, are intertwined. This inner circle of this secret brotherhood that runs all these things. Okay? This guy was one of them. He was very high up in there. And you heard his opinions upon any of those who did not meet the approval of this inner council. And, those were his thoughts. And he really gave us some good nuggets of information in there, true and valuable information. But just the shocking admissions made in there that this secret group at the topmost of the power structure has been, he says they could allegedly trace the dates of their founding back to the year 4255 BC, and beyond that. So, I mean, you're talking about these secret teachings have been passed down through generations in these many different orders. And he's talking about things like divine law here. And you see how they view themselves as being the keepers of these secrets of the ages. They're the arbiters of this divine law, that it's their divine providence to do so. They're the ones who select, those that they think are worthy to climb this ladder and take over these orders, these secret orders, and, bring about these changes on the earth. This is a very telling kind of thing, and this guy was a very high-ranking member of this organization. So, for what it's worth, there it is. That's probably something that some people within these orders are not going to be happy about it getting out into the public. But like I said, it's out there free on the internet. You just have to look for it. It's there. This information's available to us now. And this is the ironic thing. This whole idea, the internet, this very thing that they built in order to enslave us, has actually spilled a lot of their secrets on them. So that we're able to actually use it as a means to fight back against them when they intended for it to be our ultimate prison. Like everything else, technology is a tool. You could use it for good or for bad. And we just need to continue to be wise and use it for good things and to expose things like this. And, do I believe that this R. Swineburne Clymer guy was a bad guy per se, or inherently evil? I don't know. I can't say for sure. I think he had a lot of good ideas. I think maybe he had good intentions, but I think he was ultimately misled. And, these ideas that he's been taught became twisted at some point. And it's the same with many of these other groups within these power circles. And maybe that's exactly what he was warning about in his writings. Who could say for sure? Most people that get involved with, like, the Masons and stuff like that are generally good people. And they don't really know what they got themselves involved with until they get to the highest, most levels of it. So, with that being said, sometimes they have a twinge of conscience, but they're bound by their blood oaths and their obligations because bad things happen to them if they break those. So, that's kind of a dangerous place to be in. So many of them just go along to get along. And, that's kind of how many of these different organizations have come to power in the world, through the use of secrecy. Secrecy is one of the biggest mind control tools ever invented. and it's one that's used to the nth degree within these secret societies and within the power structure. The being able to hold the knowledge over somebody's head that they don't know, to know something somebody else doesn't, that gives you a sort of power over them. And they use this concept in spades all the time for a lot of this stuff. And that's why they cling to a lot of these different ideas of like divine law and things like that. They understand some things about the natural world that we don't, because we've never been taught. It's always been there, and it's always been free to learn for people. But if you don't seek after it and don't learn it, then how do you know? And that's why they've tried to cut us off from the natural world and steer us into this whole artificial world that we live in now, because that way we'll never understand these natural laws or natural concepts and never be able to free ourselves from their control. And that's basically what it's about. So at the end of the day, we could either read this stuff, understand what they're talking about, try and find out more about this natural world we live in and more about divine law or natural law and the things that really bind us here and the things that they've used against us to bind us. Or we could just sit back and be happy little sheep and be chained to a computer in an eternal cycle of debt and misery for the rest of our existence here. Or we could stand up and be free humans and speak out against this stuff and have a better future. So, anyway, thanks for hanging out with me again tonight, guys. That's the end. Like and subscribe. Catch you next time.